Metal Jesus back again. Now, a lot of people remember the classic Atari 2600. That was a great gaming console. I loved it as a kid. And some people might remember the follow-up, which was the 5200, and then Atari released the 7800. But there's very few people who remember their swan song, which was the 64-bit Atari Jaguar, released in 1993. This was the last Atari console ever released. And I thought it might be kind of fun to show you the console, show you some of the games I have for it, and tell you what was great about it and not so great. Let's take a look. In the beginning, there was the mighty Atari 2600. This was the classic console that everyone loves. After that, they released the Atari 5200, which was a pretty powerful console with a really crappy joystick. Then there was the video game crash in the mid-80s. And at the end of the 80s, they released the 7800. Tried to compete with the Nintendo, it didn't do so well. Finally, in 1993, Atari came back with the Jaguar. Now, the Jaguar is the first 64-bit console ever released, although to be fair, it's a mishmash of 32-bit processors and 64-bit. But there's no denying that at the time it was released, it was considered a very powerful console. So here's a look at the console itself, and I gotta be honest with you, the first time I saw it, actually I was kind of impressed. It's a nice looking console. I like the flat black, I like the vents on it, and it's really slim. Honestly, it kind of looks like an exotic sports car. I mean, I just think that Atari nailed the look and design of this console. It's pretty cool looking. And then it has a lot of the typical things. For instance, you can plug in 2 joysticks in the front. There's a power button at the top there that lights up. And it's got the blood red Jaguar logo. And then it has the typical power and also the places where you can do the video out and things like that. I should also note that there was an optional CD drive that popped in on the top that came out very late in the life of the console itself and didn't do very well. But from what I can gather, it helps in doing homebrew games today because you can burn your own CDs and play them on it. So now here's the joystick, and the joystick I think is a mixed bag for a lot of people. I thought I would hate it. It looks clunky, but honestly, it actually feels really good in my hands. Now, I have large hands, so maybe that's part of it, but it's actually pretty light, and it feels decent. The only thing I would complain is that the number pad keys at the bottom are kind of lame, and they're not really used in a lot of games. And also, the D-pad is fairly shallow, and so it's hard to be truly precise, although I think I'm just nitpicking at that point. Overall, I really do like the controller. It's not bad. So now I'd like to show you how the games were sold and packaged. Here's a game. This is an excellent game called Iron Soldier. I'm going to show you some gameplay here in just a couple minutes. The games are sold in cardboard boxes. This game here has a really nice manual, and it also has a little plastic insert that I'm going to talk about in a second. Now here is the cartridge itself, and they're very unique looking. They have this bent handle at the top that kind of reminds me of a Japanese temple or something. It's really interesting looking, totally unique to this console, and actually I kind of like it. I know a lot of people think it looks kind of dumb, but it's just all part of the quirkiness that is the Jaguar. Now, I said I'd mention the little plastic insert, and it's exactly for this reason here. You insert it over the number pad on the joystick, and it helps you when selecting different parts of the game. And so, games that use it are actually pretty cool. It's kind of a unique feature to the Jaguar. So that's a console, but let's check out some of the games. So the Atari Jaguar was really only out for around 2 years. It didn't last for very long. And because of that, there's actually not that many games. There's only 67 games on cartridge, and 15 of those were on that CD I told you about. So a total of 82 games. That's not a lot. But there are some real gems on there, including this one, which is Tempest 2000. And actually, if you are a Tempest fan, this is considered one of the definitive versions of it. It's excellent on the Jaguar. In 1993, most people were really familiar with the Sega Genesis and also the Super Nintendo. And so Atari knew that they had to have a console that could do 2D sprites just like those consoles were better. And thankfully, this is a really powerful console. It's able to do 2D like nobody's business. And this is a great example right here. This is a game called Zool 2. Super fast, really fluid, and it's actually a lot of fun. It's really excellent. I enjoyed it quite a bit. But the Jaguar wanted to take on some of the other upcoming consoles at the time, for instance, like the 3DO, and they knew that the Sega Saturn was coming, as well as the Sony PlayStation. And so the Jaguar is able to do 3D graphics, although some games are better than others, and I've read that it's primarily because it was a fairly difficult console to program for. And this game is an example of it being done right. This is Aliens versus Predator, and it's very Doom-like, and it's really fun. It actually plays very well. You see them doing one section here as a Marine and this other section as the alien. So shows off the power of the Jaguar pretty well. A game that shows off the 3D capabilities of the Jaguar really well is Iron Soldier. This is a really fun game. I was actually pleasantly surprised. You play a giant mech stomping around in the city, blowing up tanks, blowing up other mechs, shooting helicopters out of the sky. The graphics are really nice. The controls are really responsive, and stuff blows up really well. It's actually a surprisingly fun game. I think if you are a new Jaguar owner, this is a must-have. So if you are a fan of my channel, you know that I love shoot 'em ups, and I was stoked to see that there's a version of Raiden on the Jaguar, and it looks fantastic, and it plays pretty well. I'm really familiar with this game, and actually I own a couple different versions of it, including on the PlayStation 2. And unfortunately, this game kind of highlights the problems with the D-pad on the current joystick. It's just too twitchy. It needs an analog stick for something quite like this. Cannon Fodder is a game I wasn't familiar with until I actually started playing with the Jaguar, but I know it's on a couple different systems, and actually it's really fun, and this is a great version of it. Essentially what it is, it's a real-time strategy game where you control the cursor and you guide soldiers around while taking on enemies in real time, and I had a bunch of fun with this game. It's actually really, really well made. So for the most part, I've actually been pleasantly surprised with a lot of the games in the Jaguar, but I'm not convinced it can really do 3D graphics, and I think that it's disappointing that some of the developers tried. What you're seeing here is a racing game called Checkered Flag that, frankly, is barely playable. It just doesn't seem to be able to do 3D graphics really well, and they don't look that great, and the D-pad is just, it's almost impossible to control your car. You keep careening into mountains and stuff like that. So it's not great. Another game that really highlights the lack of 3D power is this motocross game here. Now, you may think your internet connection is slow, but no, that's actually the frame rate of this game. I mean, it's terrible. It's barely playable. Now, I think to be fair, maybe this developer just didn't have enough time to really learn the hardware and, to get the most out of it. But the fact that they even tried and then released a game this bad and this ugly is just kind of unforgivable. It definitely doesn't highlight anything positive about the console. Now, to be fair though, a lot of people say that the version of Doom and Wolfenstein on the Jaguar are awesome. So, maybe I should try more games. All right, well, that's my review of the Atari Jaguar. Now, you would think that this thing would be dead, but, surprisingly, there is a huge following for this console, and there's a ton of people who still love collecting games for it, and programmers are still making homebrew games for it. It's actually really cool. So, if you're interested in the Atari Jaguar, follow the links below this video, and you'll find a ton more stuff about it. I want to thank Emilio and Reggie, who are the owners of D-Pad Gaming in Burien. Now, that's a little retro gaming store I go to all the time. It's really cool. And they let me borrow the Jaguar and also a ton of games for it. Super nice guys. If you live in the Seattle area and you're into retro gaming, definitely check out D-Pad. All right, I want to thank you for watching my channel and thanks for subscribing. Take care.